So we're going to start off with a car builder who, in the history of Arizona racing, if you go back to the post-World War II era in the 1950s, some of the best car builders in Arizona were working out of Tucson, Arizona. Many are familiar with Hank Henry, who built the cars that Parnelly Jones won 2 USAC national championships in sprint cars. Many of you remember the Twister by Hank Arnold. Many of you may not know Roger McCluskey, before he became a top-rate driver, was also a very top-rate builder. But there was one guy in common that had his fingerprints on every car that came out of Tucson. One way or another, he worked with each of those guys. And then magic struck in 1968. He built a car. He teamed up with one of the original 1968 Hall of Famers, Bob Kleberg, and they won the first Western World Championship at Manzanita in 1968. Jimmy Blanton just reminded me, with 120 cars in the pits that night, Kleberg dominated in that car. They came back and won the 1969 Arizona Racing Association Championship in the car. That car then got sold to a guy named Lloyd Meek. And the gentleman who is going to accept the award won his next championship driving that car as well. But tonight we're going to induct the builder of that car, and had such an influence on all of the cars that came out of Tucson during that period. His name is Bruce Robinson. And accepting on behalf of Bruce, we have Arizona driving champion Frank McDaniel, who drove one of Bruce's cars to a championship, also knew Bruce very well. And so he's going to accept the plaque on behalf of Bruce Robinson.
Yeah, go Brucey. Thank you for all you race fans for coming out here. I wish you would have been racing when all you folks were around. It would have been fun. Bruce Robinson was an individual that had a special talent. He started building cars before they had Heliarc and all of the special welding equipment, wire feed and all this type of stuff. He would take a aluminum rod that already had the flux on it that you were supposed to use a torch with in an arc welder, and he would take a torch and weld aluminum with that particular rod, and when he got done it looked like it was Heliarc. And he did that on all different sizes of aluminum and tubing of any type, and any of the cars that he touched were basically the same. He came up with a design that would work almost any place at any time, and different guys with different driving techniques could win with it. And so he had a backup, I don't know how long, as long as he lived. That's all he did was build cars. And he was a gentleman that had a talent very similar to Hank Henry and McCluskey and all of those guys that come out of Tucson. And I was lucky enough to meet all these guys when I was like 15 years old, and Roger was like 8 years older than I was, and grew up with them. And that's how I got involved. But any of the cars that Brucey put together were not only fast, but they were safe. And anybody that you can ask that drove one of those cars really enjoyed it because they were winners. And Bruce Robinson was a winner. And I'm honored to accept on his behalf.
Our next inductee comes, and a lot like Bruce Robinson, this man had his fingerprints on just about everything in Arizona racing. Drag racing, super modified, sprint cars, late model stock cars, high performance engines across the board. Started out with a friend of his. They worked, they decided, hey, you know, we might be able to do something here. They built a Corvette that a former and a member of the Arizona Motorsports Hall of Fame, Trip Shoemake, drove, became famous in, went on to drive funny cars. Also was involved with, many of you may remember the car Randy's Romper from Randy Ingram. Also did that. Many of you remember Big Bird Bob Ream, his son's still racing today. He also helped a young Jerry Miller, who is here with us tonight, and Rick Stewart get their career started on the half mile at Manzanita. All of us just simply know him as Chuck. He's the owner of Chuck's Speed Center. His full name is Chuck Forstie, and on behalf of Chuck Forstie, his family is here to accept the award for him.
Wanted to thank all of you who have supported us through all these years, being at Chuck Speed Center for 53 years, and pretty proud of that. And thank you very much for just thinking about putting him into this wonderful place. He's a little embarrassed about so he doesn't do that. He doesn't do this stuff. So anyway, thank you everybody for just being there for us. Thank you.
Our next inductee stepping up alongside of me won a SCCA championship in, I want to say, what year was that?
My first one was in 1978.
Okay, so in 1978 he wins an SCCA national championship. At the time he was the youngest driver in history ever to do that. In between, he wins 52 national races, 4 regional titles, is named Driver of the Year several times over. Also decided he was going to try his hand at IMSA racing. The first time he climbed to an IMSA car, he drove a Mazda RX-7 to 4th place against the best of IMSA drivers at the time at Pocono Speedway. And then to top it all off, 25 years later, he wins another SCCA championship. In addition to all of that, he found time to race midgets here in the state of Arizona for quite a few years. And so our next inductee into the Hall of Fame is Mr. Mike Pinney.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's quite an honor to be here tonight, and to represent the road racing community is something I'm really proud of. None of us could do this if it wasn't for the crowd, the spectators and the workers and the track promoters. But I want to thank Jimmy and Pam for all the work that they put into this. It's just amazing what they do. And I'm just so proud. The only thing that would make tonight any better is if my dad was here. So thank you very much, and have a great evening.
Congratulations, Mike. Honor and pleasant presenting you with that. Next guy in the get to be inducted this year started out as a quarter midget driver. In fact, we both were about starting our careers one way or another at about the same time. Started out in quarter midgets, racing out of Glendale and South Mountain with his family, brother, his mom and dad. They became 4D racing. He went on to become the SCOA Rookie of the Year in sprint cars. And then somewhere along the line he got sidetracked because they found out he had a talent for being a mechanic. Ended up going to work for Vince Granatelli. Vince Granatelli went out of business, so he found work with a guy named Derek Walker. Well, Derek Walker decided he was going to close the shop and become an official for IndyCar. So he started with this team, Chip Ganassi Racing, 27 years ago now? 27 years ago. He rose through the ranks from transmissions and so forth all the way. He is now a chief mechanic for that team. With that team, he has been the chief mechanic on 3 national championship winning cars with a driver named Scott Dixon. He also won the Indianapolis 500 with Dixon. And this year he added yet another accolade to his credentials. The driver that he was crew chief for this year, Felix Rosenquist, became the IndyCar Rookie of the Year this year. And a lot of that has to go to this man's work. I really, I know I'm embarrassing him right now, but in IndyCar, car prep is so important. There's so many little things that need to be massaged on the car. And our next inductee, Ricky Davis, oversees that every week on the car, so he plays a very important role. And all of you know him very well, even though you might not know it. But when any of those drivers ever make a pit stop, there's a guy kneeling down, holding a tire by the right front. Driver comes in, air hammer takes the tire off, air hammer puts the tire on. He stands up, goes like this. That's Ricky Davis. And Ricky, it's an honor to welcome you into the Arizona Motorsports Hall of Fame.
You know what, Ron, it's really my honor. I mean, I look at who I'm coming in with and who's here before me, and to see Frank McDaniels holding a trophy or plaque for Bruce Robbins, and know that my dad actually worked on that car when Frank drove it, and now to be here with him and know he's in, I'm completely over the moon with this, and so proud of myself for what we've been able to accomplish. But realistically, for me to be here, I need about 200 to 250 of my closest friends and employees that I've ever worked with that got me here. I didn't do this myself, but I absolutely love sprint car racing. I've loved it my entire life. I feel very fortunate and very lucky to be here with these people, but who I'm really happy for, and who they don't know how lucky they are, is the people that are watching tonight, because they're watching the future Hall of Famers. And thank you very much, Jimmy, and thank you, Ron, and thank you, Arizona Motorsports Hall of Fame. I love you guys. I love sprint car racing, and let's see what happens next.
It's going to be a good main event tonight. Racetrack shaping up, isn't it? Our final inductee going into the Sprint Car Hall of Fame was one of the first guys in Arizona to get an electronic balancing machine back in, I think it was 1958. They started balancing engines, and then one of the guys said, I think I might like to drive these things. So in 1959, he started his driving career. And back in those days, what we now know as sprint cars were basically what were called jalopies. That was the best you could be when you raced it at Manzanita. He was the Rookie of the Year. Later, he went on, got himself a sprint car, continued to be a very successful driver, engine builder, won a lot of races, he retired. He actually also went back to the Midwest for a while, represented Arizona there, won races against the best in the Midwest back in 1965, 66, back in that time. When he retired from racing, he continued his engine building and car building and all of the things, and his career has never stopped. He is still very intimately involved in our sport. Many of the drivers that you're watching here tonight in both divisions owe a lot to this next gentleman. Wendy McDonald called him the bounty hunter, Mr. Bob Bishop.
Well, thanks for all the accolades. First off, I got to thank Jimmy and all the board for all the stuff they've done for me, and all the rest of us really. But Jimmy and Pam really worked hard on this deal, and we appreciate it. I'm really, really proud to be put on the list with all the great guys that were my heroes. I bought my first camshaft from Wayne Weiler when I was 15 years old, building my first motor. Him and Roger McCluskey, and all the guys I got to race with when I first started, were all great people, and just really proud to be part of this. And yeah, I helped Jimmy a little bit too. Jimmy used to come and ask me questions 100 mile an hour when he was 10 or 12 years old. Never stopped. But anyway, I've had a long run of this thing, and I'm just proud to be here. I got 5 or 6 cars out here running tonight with my motors in them. I'm just really proud of them. These guys work hard. Any of you guys up here that are gearheads that want something really fun to do and something you can do all your life, you can do it at home, you can do it at your neighbors. Your wife and kids can join in with you. You can come out here and have a good time, good, clean fun. Jump into it, man. Don't worry about whether you got money or not. Just find a class that's cheap enough you can get into. Anyway, thanks a lot. I thank everybody for coming out.
Thank you, Bob. And that's the class of 2019 again. Bruce Robinson, Chuck Forstie, Mike Pinney, Ricky Davis, and Bob Bishop, the 2019 inductees into the Arizona Motorsports Hall of Fame. Yeah, if we can get all of the recipients up here together at the same time, we'd really appreciate to get a picture of them real quick and let the fans recognize the people that are being inducted in.